Slashers. I absolutely love them, can't get enough of them. And when a film comes along and uses the old slasher standards, yet somehow makes it all feel fresh and cool, it's worth screaming from the mountains about. X did just that with a ton of fantastic performances and a wonderfully smart and twisted script. This is M.L. Miller Frights Best in Horror Countdown 2021 through 2022. Counting down the best in horror films released from October 1st, 2021 through September 30th, 2022. According to me, M.L. Miller. Here we go. Number 6. X was released on March 18th, 2022. It's available on Showtime and for rent on Amazon Prime from A24 Films. It's directed and written by Ty West. It's 1979 and a group of young, beautiful people set out to make a porno movie on the cheap. They convince an elderly man to loan out a house on his farmland property to film the movie, though they don't tell him what kind of movie it is. Little do these youngsters know, the elderly man's wife suffers from dementia, which grows increasingly violent and troubling at night. Once the elderly couple get wind of the naughtiness going on, all kinds of murder and mayhem occur. There's so much good going on in X, I don't know if I can fit it all into one review. Let's start with the cast. Every single player in this horrifying story brings a unique charm to their respective roles. So much so that you don't even realize that half of the movie is over before any real carnage occurs. I was just so caught up in the varied personalities and how they conflicted with one another, I didn't even mind that there was no bloodshed, though there were plenty of strange and ominous moments scattered throughout that first half. Still, these are well fleshed out characters played by talented actors. The film doesn't just go one note. It decides to give these lambs lining up to be slaughtered lives beyond what we see on screen. Might as well go down the list. Brittany Snow plays blonde bombshell Bobby Lynn. Yes, Snow is scorching during the sex scenes, and there are plenty of sex scenes in this movie. But a character that could be a one-note ditz is given some scenes where she shows off some creative talent at directing. I've never heard of Kid Cudi before. I wouldn't be able to pick his music out from a lineup, but man, does he act the hell out of this one. He's got a charisma of a young Jamie Foxx as Jackson, who not only has a talent that would put Mark Wahlberg's Dirk Diggler role to shame, but is also an ex-Marine who did tours of duty in Vietnam. Let's keep going. My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To and Super Dark Times, Owen Campbell plays RJ, a wannabe filmmaker who's attempting to bring some class to this adult film and use it as a stepping stone to make his own movies. While this doesn't sound very deep, his relationship with his girlfriend, Lorraine, played by Jenna Ortega, who starred in Scream this year and will soon play Wednesday Addams in Tim Burton's new Netflix series, is very much so. Lorraine follows RJ on this trip because she's a supportive girlfriend, but she doesn't really approve of working on an adult film. That is, until she sees how it's made and becomes, shall we say, curious. We also have Wayne, played by The Ring's Martin Henderson, who's older than the rest, but acts as the financier and visionary of the group. Though he left his wife for Mia Goth's Maxine, the few scenes they share together show how much the couple loves one another, or at least uses one another to get what both of them want, fame and money. This is a cast where there isn't a weak link to be found. All of their performances simply elevate this movie to another level. Finally, we have Mia Goth. She's a force to be reckoned with in X. Every scene she's in elicits conflicting emotions. One second, she's an innocent in a sharp and thorny world. The next, she's a seductress devouring anyone who gazes at her with her eyes. Her Maxine is the throughway to the story, and while this film plays it extremely fast and loose as to who, if anyone, will be the final girl of this atypical slasher, every second she is on screen, let me know that this is the film that's going to make her a star. She had uncanny and unique roles in films like Suspiria, Marrowbone, and A Cure for Wellness in the past, but this is the scintillating performance that's going to give her the boost into the big leagues. Ty West's story is not a new one. He's borrowed elements from Tobe Hooper's Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Eaten Alive. There are homages to The Shining and Psycho. He also tosses in some metatextual stuff that brought a bright, shining smile to my face. It's not obnoxious, just cleverly orchestrated naturally out of the script at the midway point. It's a consciousness of what it is that few filmmakers have the nuance to pull off, but West does. It's at this point in the film that X goes out of its way to make a comment about the adult film industry as well. Reminiscent of how Paul Thomas Anderson fleshed out the porn business in Boogie Nights, West injects a whole lot of respect and depth to the profession in a mid-movie conversation centering on Lorraine's understanding of the film that's been made so far. It's a scene that not only adds a meta sense to the film, but it also leaves you thinking about the porn industry a little differently. West also does some great intercutting between the porno being shot and the events happening around the filmmakers that they're oblivious to. This playful editing adds to the fun tone of the film. X is not a morose sorrow porn like A24 has produced in the past with films like Midsummer, The Witch, and Hereditary. West remembers just what kind of film he's making every minute of the movie. It's clever, but not so clever as to put the audience off. It's a horror movie, the lowest form of horror to some. Gasp, a slasher film. But West makes sure you're either laughing, wincing, or screaming all the way through. Along with Goth, this is going to be the movie that puts West over the top into the big leagues as well. I saw this potential in The House of the Devil and The Innkeepers, but X shows that this is the right time and place for Ty West. X relies heavily on humor and horror at the expense of one of the few groups it's okay to make fun of these days, the elderly. It's sad and somewhat brash and disrespectful, but it's the judgmental elderly versus the uninhibited youth story that's been told many, many times before. X just highlights the elderly as monsters extremely effectively by giving the old couple almost as much screen time and character nuance as the rest of the cast. There are no mindless serial killers offing pretty people simply to up the body count. There's a real developed reason why the old woman, Pearl, acts as horrifically as she does. It's a sad reason. It's a reason that made the audience I saw it with squirm and uncomfortably laugh a little. It makes Pearl a truly sympathetic and memorable monster, one I'm sure is going to go down as a new icon of the genre. There's a grace to Pearl that gives such depth to her actions, so much further than just gross out and shock humor. You might giggle at first, but when you give the character some thought, Pearl is one of the most tragic movie monsters in recent memory. I can't recommend X enough. This is a wrapped gift from Ty West to all slasher fans. The Scream series once single-handedly reinvented and revitalized the horror genre, but while this year's Scream had some really fun moments, I feel it just didn't bring enough to the table to make it to the main countdown this year. Still, Scream is an important horror franchise and deserves to at least be mentioned in this countdown somewhere. Scream was released on January 14th. It's available to rent on Amazon Prime. It's directed by Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, and written by James Vanderbilt and Guy Busick, from characters created by Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven. A new series of killings begin in Woodsboro, and it looks like Ghostface is back in the stabbing game. This time, he, she, they are focusing on a pair of estranged sisters, Tara, the Babysitter 2 and upcoming Wednesday star Jenna Ortega, and Sam, In the Heights' Melissa Barrera. But how do the sisters tie in with the murders committed to Woodsboro all those years ago? I'm not telling, but it brings former Sheriff Dewey Riley, played by David Arquette, out of a self-imposed exile, and Sidney Prescott, Neve Campbell, and Gail Weathers, played by Courtney Cox, back into town to finish this one last time. Again. With a slew of friends who might possibly be the killer, everyone's a suspect. Scream 2022 is a rock-solid sequel, and the hype saying that it most likely may be the best film in the franchise since the original is valid. It's not overly meta, though there are a lot of references not only to the Scream franchise, but also the fictional Stab series and horror movies in general. It's not overly populated with fodder for Ghostface to kill, but there are a couple of extra randos tossed in to keep the plot moving. The mystery is a solid one, with clues peppered in along the way, and quite a few reveals and twists that will definitely surprise the audience. I made a few predictions in my Scream Pep Talk video, and at least one of them was accurate. So let me pull a muscle patting myself on the back for that one. But anyway, for the most part, Scream 2022 was an entertaining time at the movies. It doesn't reinvent the wheel, it simply goes back and utilizes the legacy characters well. It also tells a new, fresh tale using the same template. And that's all we asked for as fans of the Scream series. One of the things that surprised me the most was that, for the first time in the series, for the most part, this isn't Sidney's story. I think this was a bold and smart move by the filmmakers to shift the primary focus from Sidney's plight, which was getting pretty damn repetitious and stale, to the story of Sam and Tara. Yes, it's all part of one expansive dark history of Woodsboro, but the bulk of the film is all about these new characters. And for that to work, these characters had to be interesting. Not just cheap carbon copies of old characters. These had to be new characters. For the most part, this new group of youngsters were pretty fun to get to know. Sure, they all are perfect people with great hair, pencil-thin bodies, and bright shiny teeth, but they all felt fully realized, and even better, they were all played by talented young actors like Don't Breathe's Dylan Mignette, The Boys' Jack Quaid, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's Mikey Madison, The Cleansing Hour's Kyle Gallner, Cuba Gooding Jr.'s son Mason Gooding, and newcomers Jasmine Savoy Brown and Sonia Amar. These young actors didn't have me wondering where Sid, Dewey, and Gale were. They held their own, and that was refreshing. It's something that didn't happen in the previous Scream movies where they introduced a whole new cast of characters. These actors were actually pretty talented. More importantly, the way Sidney, Dewey, and Gale were reintroduced was a result of the story. They popped back in naturally, when necessary. I was wondering if seeing these three former young and beautiful actors amongst the new young and beautiful would only highlight how old Campbell, Arquette, and Cox are. But this script actually had them grow up. In the other films, it's almost like the three main stars were still trying desperately to be those young and beautiful leads, sporting hairstyles and clothes that kids a decade or so their junior should be wearing. While it was somewhat funny, I was kind of relieved seeing Sidney in some sensible mom jeans. They left the tight clothing to the skinny youngsters, and it made things a lot less cringy. Most importantly, the filmmaking unit commonly known as Radio Silence, Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett, deliver some very tense and downright scary moments. As said in the film's opening sequence, the earlier films often lensed with way too much lighting, and not a lot of creative shots. Some scenes felt like they were setups for some kind of TV drama. Bettinelli-Olpin and Gillett fill Scream 2022 with dark sequences and varying angles, amplifying the mood. Every kill was memorable and creative. They even play around with the horror movie cliches like what's behind the door in an excruciatingly fun sequence of opening and closing doors that really works, especially if you've seen a ton of horror films. The reveal at the end turned out to be somewhat of a surprise for me, a pleasant surprise at that. I won't reveal it here, but I felt the killers really worked. Numerous times, as I slipped on my sleuthing hat through the span of the film, I was guessing who the killers could be, and numerous times that persons ended up getting killed. So points to this film for thwarting my detective abilities. The motive of the killers ended up being a tiny bit preachy, but no more so than the talky monologue Billy and Stu provided in the original, which is full of movie and cultural references as well. Scream 2022 isn't a perfect film, and the one glaring flaw is a problem with a lot of movies in the Scream franchise and beyond. That being that ever since Reservoir Dogs and Tarantino's line about how long it takes to die from a stomach wound is milked until the teat is dry in Scream 2022. So many stomach wounds, and instead of wriggling around on the floor and bleeding out, these people are fighting, running up and down stairs, flipping over couches and tables. Hell, I eat a bad burrito and I'm bent over for days. But in Scream 2022, characters receive life-ending wounds to the abdomen, but it seems all it takes is an ace bandage, a shock blanket, and a cup of coffee, and that shit's all healed up. Yes, these sudden bursts of adrenaline are a thing, but let's call it what it is, and just say it's plot armor. I couldn't help but chuckle at how many characters in this movie would be shitting in a bag for the rest of their days had these wounds occurred in real life. But I guess that's a minor quibble in an otherwise surprising and enjoyable entry in this big-budget horror franchise. There were surprise twists and cameos, interesting plot threads, extremely gory kills with all kinds of gnarly knife-to-flesh bloodshed. Wes would be proud at what the Radio Silence guys have done, and I hope if there is a return to Woodsboro after this installment, and Matt Bettinelli-Olpin and Tyler Gillett return to Helmet. As always, feel free to agree, disagree, or give me your own picks for your favorite horror movies. It's October, so let's talk horror. Come back tomorrow for the next level in the Best in Horror Countdown 2021 through 2022. Be sure to hit all of the pertinent bells and whistles down below, and you'll never miss a post. Happy Halloween, folks.